It's my pleasure to welcome our three guests to Lucidity. We have Debbie, Kathy, and Mary, and they're going to be talking today about their experiences with dementia and how it's affected the care of a loved one. And I know it can be very traumatic and very unexpected, so anything you have to say and want to share with our audience to help them understand the kinds of things you went through would be immensely helpful.
I guess my first experience with dementia was my husband, who had Parkinson's. The fourth stage of Parkinson's is dementia, which happened to be the hardest part. It was so hard to see this very intelligent man not comprehending anything that was going on, or being upset with me about everything, because once again he just didn't understand what was going on with him. When he died 5 years ago, I was living in Oregon and came to visit my nieces and nephews here, and found that my brother, my big brother, had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and that I felt, number one, I was very upset about that, but I also thought about his wife and how she was going to have to be caregiving, and she would probably need some help. So I decided to move to Florida. My sister-in-law was very, very active, so I was with my brother probably over 5 hours a day, every day.
From what I understand from reading a lot of testimony from dementia caregivers is that the one thing that they find, what I like to call a virtue, is what they find is that patience is probably the most important virtue in that dementia care. I don't know if that rings true with your experience, or if you have any other insights about the kinds of resources you were pulling on to help deal with two incidences of dementia in your life, which is massively huge. And it's quite a burden, and two very close loved ones in your husband and your brother.
My mother's patience is like no other, because it was patience. Yeah, it was hard.
We were in Oregon. We were very close to the Oregon Health and Science University. They had an incredible department for Parkinson's, and they took. Sometimes I felt they took more care of me than they did the patient itself. But we dealt a lot with what was going to happen with the dementia.
I cried just because my poor mother, because she would help me after school, called me one day just in tears. I mean, I can't have him here because of how my grandfather, how Joe is treating her, and I felt so bad for her. I was like, Mom, it's fine, Indy's fine, it's okay. But that was really,
it was
really
so hard
for
Indigo, my grandson, to understand what was happening.
One of the things I'm thinking of is something called caregiver creep, where a caregiver is taking care. It doesn't have to be dementia, but it affects obviously dementia caregivers quite a bit. Is that they begin with a small set of responsibilities or tasks, and it's probably because dementia or Alzheimer's is in an early stage, so it's not as burdensome. And then suddenly they find themselves up to their neck in all these things they have to do, not just practical tasks, but there's a lot of emotional and psychological responsibilities they've been feeling. So it sounds like, from what I am gathering, is that the two stories about how you dealt with two loved ones sound like it was just basically very quickly finding yourself in that position.
There was a time where Joe's doctors were telling me, you need help. You need help in the home, where we had to bring in some caregivers every once in a while. Joe had a way of getting them to leave, and then he'd lock them out. I would get these telephone calls from the caregivers. He locked me out again. But he didn't want anybody else there.
Well, and you also had, one thing too is dealing with, it's very hard for all family members, like who's able to take care of, and and stuff, that you had to deal with a lot of that dynamic too.
Mm-hmm.
I personally wasn't around my uncle that much. I only saw him a couple times. And what really, at first I thought, how could a man that was just so sharp and so on the ball have this, because I didn't understand exactly how you get dementia or reasons why, and I still don't. But there was one night I was telling a bunch of Bradley stories. Do you remember that night?
Yeah.
And he seemed very engaged in it. And then the next time I came, I don't think he knew who I was. And it was just really just so hard to watch. But he got up like every day, and that I knew of. I don't know how long it was till he didn't get up,
Always.
but always dressed.
Dapper.
Like dapper. I asked his daughter, I said, does he ever wear jeans? And she's like, no. Because he was so routine about that. He'd have on like khakis, nice, pressed, everything put together, just like he always was.
Even when he went into memory care, he would dress like that. And so often they would let him out because they didn't think that he was a patient. Because he was, unfortunately, when he did go into memory care, he was only there for, probably maybe 30 days, and he fell and broke his hip and his wrist. And that was a really heavy decline for him once that happened.
I'm curious about coping mechanisms again, because like Mary, my experience is sort of theoretically I understand what's going on, but in the moment, you have a visceral, you have an emotional response, and it is sort of why don't you understand me? And the cliche, or truism, it's not a cliche. The truism is that when someone who suffers from dementia can't remember you or can't remember a certain memory, the knee-jerk reaction tends to be anger or frustration. And then if you're like me, then that comes out right away. It's like, what? Because I can be impatient sometimes. But did you find yourselves developing any kind of ways of stopping yourself from having those kinds of reactions, or ways to try and redirect the loved one back to a part of their life where it didn't rely on a disjointed memory? So in a lot of the case studies I've read, people found it very helpful that if the loved one says something where they don't remember you, or they don't remember someone, or they get something wrong, they say, oh, well, that's interesting. And they try to fit it into a prior part of their life that they know they will remember. So maybe it's going back to, remember that time you wore that suit, dressing dapperly? Or a lot of times it's with a piece of music that they remember from their adolescence, and that's sort of, it's not a way of remedying the situation, but it's a way of, I guess, pivoting, mitigating it, or deflating it so they don't feel insecure and frustrated, and then you don't feel insecure and frustrated in a different way.
I do. I don't. You were like, you take him for a ride. I think she was good at it. I don't. How did you?
Well, as far as Joe was concerned,
Yeah.
He, his dementia was, okay, let's go home.
That's right.
We've been living in the same house for the last 30 years, but let's go home. And so what I would do is I would just put him in the car and just ride around, and usually end up at Dairy Queen, which he loved. And when we first get in the car, he'd go, do you have your passport? It was cute.
Your passport?
Because we were going to Mexico.
Oh, okay, that's the home he wanted to go to.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like you learn a lot about each other when this kind of stuff happens. I think because it's hard, and both the men were very, very just the kind of people that just knew what they were doing, knew what they wanted, or were articulate. Now, Joe didn't talk as much as my uncle did. But when he did talk, he had a lot to say. But I don't know.
Both of them very intelligent men, very old souls.
Yeah, and just very much. I'm trying to think about the caregiving piece. I mean, I know that it's a humbling experience to caregive like that. And the one thing I have to say that came out of this is that my mom was able to give to Joe what he wanted, and he wanted to pass at his home. And she did it. And I mean, I don't know. I still don't know how you did it, Mom. And it was, and as beautiful as it can get, it was beautiful the way it happened.
You hear so much about the sudden onset of dementia symptoms and how shocking it is for loved ones to see, and then if it's early stages, how disturbing it is for the person who has been diagnosed with either mild cognitive impairment or at risk of dementia and showing some cognitive symptoms of it. So I'm going to kind of turn the conversation a little bit, but we can certainly come back to reflections on the memories. But this has to do with a little bit more difficult question, just in a different register, and it's sort of looking at the life lessons and wisdom you've gained from this experience of caring for loved ones with dementia, and thinking about how you see your own life in terms of the quality of life you have. So thinking about the things you love to do, the hobbies or activities, and what it might mean for you if you ever had to think about when you crossed a certain threshold where you were not living that quality of life because of cognitive decline. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because the difficulty of dementia when you're suffering from it is that you lose a grasp of a frame of reference where you don't know how you used to be. And for people who are cognitively healthy, one of their worries is, if I ever get in that condition, I don't want to be in that condition, and whatever that might mean. Obviously, there's different ways that can play out. So thinking about your own life, what kinds of benchmarks, or how would you think of the moment where the quality of life declined enough that you might have to make a hard decision, or you might signal to family members a hard decision has to be made of some kind?
I need to know this because this is amazing. This is happening because it's something that I need to know.
Well, let me just start with, I thank God every day for how healthy I am. When I see in this community people that aren't healthy, and it's hard for me to comprehend that I wouldn't be able to take care of myself. I know the last year that I've been spending at memory care, I definitely don't want to go into a home like that. But then on the other hand, I realized also the people that were there, most of them didn't realize that they were in a home, So it would really be very, very hard not to be able to have the social life that I have.
Asking the question, the very difficult questions, it's hard to respond to, and I think Kathy gave a wonderful answer. I think the right way to think about what's happening in this space is that it's opening up another space for the family to have conversations. So it's sort of, remember when Todd from Lucidity came and he said he asked that question? I think maybe, I've had some more thoughts about this, and you kind of thresh it out in small steps, maybe 2 steps back kind of thing. And from everything that I've read about people going through this kind of thing, they wish that the space had been created or the opportunity had been created beforehand. And people just don't want to talk about it for obvious reasons. One, nobody likes to talk about demise of their life, and the other is, again, the optimism bias.
I'm an only child, and I want, and my mother knows this, I will be her caretaker. Whatever that looks like. I'm not trying to act like, but whatever that looks like, I will be there to but I also kind of want to be with her before that happens too, like spend time with her, because we haven't really been able to spend a lot of time together for a while.
Is that because I'm in Florida and you're in Oregon?
Yeah, that would
have something to do with it.
I mean, it's just something it's important to me. And my son knows this too.
Hopefully this session's been like a big warm-up. And the one thing I was thinking about the silver lining is that as bad as your experiences have been in the past and in the recent past, it's actually allowed you to see how there are certain opportunities to take.
Yes.
Because you see things differently. You see things in terms of, maybe it's a good thing to do the advance directive. Maybe now it's a good thing to start having conversations about this more openly. And because I'm a philosopher, I just reminded of, I love ancient Greek philosophy, but the ancient Greek philosophers had this concept called tragic wisdom. And it was this kind of bittersweet, although you've experienced tragedy, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. The one thing that arises from that is a wisdom you learn from having gone through that tragedy. So they call tragic wisdom, or I think the Greek is denon phronesis. But so now you have this kind of, I guess, life learning that I'm very thankful that you've shared with me today. And I would just like to take that opportunity to thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
You have no idea. Making lemonade out of lemons. That's what I've had. That's how I've survived. You know, you have to. I'd hope, but you're right. A lot of it's hard for a lot of people. I'm very grateful for my family. We're in a really good spot. As all the issues that we have as families have, we're connected enough that, yeah. So I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah.